What up, Wizards? It's Dub. Mtg. We like it have magic, and it is day 2 of Modern Horizons Trace preview season, and the hype train just really picking up speed at this point. We didn't get to see quite as many cards today as we did yesterday, but there's still so many like lower rarity cards that are better than the rares, but plenty of good rares and stuff to look at, not just for Modern, but also, of course, Commander. A bunch of stuff printed into Modern for the first time, so a lot to look at today. About 20 cards, in fact, so if you don't mind me, I'm going to go ahead and start. Now let's begin the day with a couple of lower rarity cards that I feel a little bit honorable mentioning, to be honest, but there's no better place for them than the beginning of the video, and I just want to kind of shine a quick spotlight on Skoa Embermage and especially Tamiyo meets the Story Circle, but Skoa first. This is 6 mana, 4 and 2 red for a 4/4 legendary Goblin Wizard at common, and when it enters the battlefield, it deals 4 to any target, but it also has Grandeur. You can discard a copy of itself and sack 2 mountains to deal 4 to any target. So it's kind of like a make your own Fire Blast, but it has to be in play, which is like a little bit lame. I feel like in the history of casting Fire Blast, only like 10% of Fire Blast have been fully paid for. All 6 mana, what are you doing? Just sack 2 mountains and end the game and go along with your day, you know? But this has to be paid 6 for at least the one time. Then you have to draw more copies of it, so I don't love it, and I don't think it's Modern playable, but maybe Pauper players want to take a look at it. 6 mana is a bit much in that format too, really, but you know, it's cool that it's common, and it's legendary, and it's kind of Fire Blast, so I at least wanted to bring it up. It's one of the neatest cards of the day, and like I was saying yesterday, I like references, but we'll move on to Tamiyo meets the Story Circle. This is 2 mana, 1 and a blue for a Saga on Chapter 1 until your next turn. Whenever a creature attacks you or a Planeswalker you got, it gets -2, -0 till end of turn. On Chapter 2, discard any number of cards, then investigate twice for each card discarded this way. On Chapter 3, shuffle up to 3 target cards from your graveyard into your library. Now, here's the thing. I don't really care about the first, well, really the sandwich modes on this. Right? Like Chapter 1 and 3 are fine, I guess. I could talk about them. I don't have that much to say. Chapter 2 is really, really intriguing, though, because on turn 3, you're discarding whatever you want to, right? That's really good for reanimation or graveyard strategies, dredge. It's pretty sweet for madness. I should probably point that out. I guess I should point that out, but it's also good for any sort of like artifact strategies because you get like 14, well, you get like 12, investigate clues like pretty easily in this case. And that is good for anything that cares about artifacts entering the battlefield. It's awesome for anything about artifacts being in play, like the number of artifacts you have in play. It's just really, really sick. So, I don't know. There's probably multiple ways to exploit just this ability on the card. Sort of a weird, like, one with nothing type ability on the second, chapter of the card, if that's what you want. But mostly, I don't know. I'm just kind of interested in making, like, 10 clues and keeping a couple of important cards in my hand. And then maybe all that glitters. I just keep talking about that card recently. Ever since they banned it, there's more and more to say about it, but I don't know. I just think that this has like a couple of interesting modes on it, especially that second one again, that I think you can probably do some broken stuff with. For instance, what of improvising? There's just a lot of stuff you can do with it, but anyway, let's move on to a couple more of these like, MDFCs. Is that what we used to call them? I've almost forgotten the name of them. They're just like cards on one side and then lands on the other side that you can play instead if you feel like it. We got like 10 of these today. They're all like tapped dual lands, on one side and then like kind of crappy cards on the other side. Again, I'm going to link Mythic Spoiler in the description if you want to see all of these, but there's 2 that I think are much, much better than most of the rest of them. You can make an argument for maybe the, middle third of these, but I think that the 2 best are almost certainly the blue-black one and the green-black one. We got to see both Waterlogged Teachings and Revitalizing Repass today. A Waterlogged Teachings is 4 mana, it's 3 and then a Dimir hybrid for an instant. Search your library for an instant card or card with flash, reveal it, put it in your hand, shuffle up, and then of course the other side is the tap Dimir land. It's called Inundated Archive, in case you wanted to know. I don't know, it's kind of neat. Like a merchant scrolly, but not really. It's kind of an instant speed tutor for very specific cards at a relatively high price. But, this is the kind of card that if they printed it into standard, I would be really interested in it. But these cards aren't standard legal, and they start at modern. So I'm not sure like how modern playable it is, but I do think that as far as like all of the ones that we got to see today, especially, this is easily one of the better ones. Really neat card for like commander or cube too. It's a tutor, so whatever, knock yourself out. I just think it's a cool card to exist, even if it's not like super modern playable, but that remains to be seen. But the green-black one is just like Snakeskin Veil, is kind of, it's just a green or black hybrid for an instant. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. It gains indestructible until end of turn. It's just like, that's better than a lot of these like effects that they've already printed. Maybe not in green, but like almost certainly in black, because obviously both green and black have the ability to save their creatures just in like slightly different ways, And black usually requires like the next time the creature would die, return it to the battlefield or return it to your hand or something like that. It's the usual version of this ability in swamps. But, now that it's Golgari hybrid, it's just a green card. It's just a straight up green card. I guess black is or indestructible is kind of a black ability, but it's also a very green ability. I don't know, I could split hairs about it all day, but long story short, this is a, dual land on one side of it, and then just like a really well casted, like really well costed, easy to cast too, either color of mana in your deck can cast it. Protection spell. It's just a really fantastic magic card in my estimation. Now I got two more uncommons I want to talk about today. One I'm going to talk about now because I think it probably is just bottom line the best uncommon from today, and maybe one of the better uncommons from the set pretty easily, better than a lot of the rares. But the other one I'm going to save for later, maybe towards the end of the video, because it's probably the card I'm most excited for in a Magic the Gathering set in the last few years. So, but first, we got to look at Amped Raptor. This is 2 mana, 1 and a red for a 2/1 Dino with first strike. When it ETBs, you get 2 energy counters. Then if you cast it from your hand, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card. You may cast that card by paying an amount of energy equal to its value rather than paying its mana cost. Amped indeed, man. This thing goes to 11. This kind of discovers or cascades or whatever when it enters the battlefield on turn 2. And if you've built your deck right, I guess, then it's always going to find another 1 or 2 drop or something, right? What is it equal to? It's not equal to or less than. It's equal to. So yeah, this can always find you another 2 drop on turn 2. And that is really good, man. Don't underestimate the value on a card like this. I'm not going to go overboard and say this is one of the best value 2 drops in the history of Magic the Gathering, but there is a tiny part of my brain that wants to go into that territory. Honestly, man, 2 mana effectively cascade for a 2 drop is very, very nasty. This is a good Magic card. It also kind of cascades into itself. Now, no, the way it's worded, if it cascades into itself, it won't then cascade again, but you will get another 2 energy counters to work with, so I guess that's cool. They gave it a keyword ability. Just everything about the card kind of seems pushed to me. A 2 drop that always gets you another 2 drop is kind of phenomenal no matter which way you slice it. Look out for this card. But we're here to look at the rares now, everybody. But not hold on now. We're actually just going to look at the other category. We did this yesterday, right? There are rares that may not be as modern playable as some of the other rares that were spoiled. That stands to reason, right? So let's look at some of those real quick so that you won't miss them or anything. And then we'll move on to cards that I think are actually playable in modern. A lot of these are going to include commander cards, again, naturally, right? So there are things to get excited about with some of these, especially cards like Argent Deus, which is a very weird card, and again, is almost certainly not quite fast enough to be modern playable, but if you're a commander or again even a cube player, then maybe you got your eye on this. It's 2 mana, 1 and a white for an artifact. It enters the battlefield with 2 oil counters on it. It's one of these. Whenever 2 or more creatures attack, period, put an oil counter on Argent Deus. You can also pay 2, tap, and remove 2 oil counters from Deus to exile another target non-land permanent. Its controller draws 2 cards, so you can target your own stuff, I guess, with this if you want to draw cards. So that's nifty, but you can just get other stuff off the table. And again, it cares when anyone attacks. So in a game of Commander, this is probably gross. The creatures don't even have to be attacking you. Just whenever 2 or more creatures attack anybody on the entire table, you get dose oil counters, and it only takes 2 oil counters to activate this. So you're just blowing stuff away. I imagine you get to a point, even though it's only 1 activation a turn, unless you're shenanigans untapping it or whatever. Even though it's only 1 activation a turn, anything on the entire table, any non-land permanent, that's actually a really big threat to the entire table. So now they have to attack you down. Well, you're just putting oil counters on this thing if they do that. I don't know. It's just kind of a neat card to think about for Commander, but I don't think it really goes anywhere outside of that format. But for a lot of players, it doesn't have to. Now, one of my absolute favorite, like probably not modern playable, but very Commander-y cards from the day is Warren Soul Trader. 3 mana, 2 and a black for a 3/3 zombie goblin wizard. Those are awesome creature types. You can pay a life and sacrifice another creature to create a treasure token. Like, this costs 3 mana. I don't love that. Like, even in Commander, I think it's kind of a lot to get going for this particular effect, but at the same time, I'm always looking for a sack outlet, and I'm always looking for treasure tokens, man. This goes directly into Prosper, like fairly obviously, but even outside of Prosper and basically everything sacrifice base, this is probably worth the slot. I mean, the Aristocrats decks are getting really, really tight in Commander at this point, and honestly, they've got a card in later on in this video that they like have to slot in at all costs. So I'm still not sure this absolutely makes the cut. You can build Aristocrats a lot of ways, but I'm interested in it. I love ramping Aristocrats. I love making treasures because you get to sacrifice them too, you know? So just a really, really cool card. And again, these creature types might matter, but altogether, just like tap, sack a creature, get a treasure token is something I'm always going to be into. Honestly, I should have just called this bit the Commander Corner again this time around, because these are really just all Commander cards. And to really drive that point home, we'll look at the Necro Bloom last in this section. This is 1 and Abzan colors, a white, a black, and a green, for a 2/7 legendary plant. Funky PT there. It's got landfall, exciting. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you get a 0/1 green plant creature token. If you control 7 or more lands with different names, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token instead. That sounds familiar. Land cards in your graveyard have Dredge 2. That means that you can basically skip a draw and instead mill 2 cards to return a land from your graveyard. So does this go in like some sort of funky modern Dredge deck? No, I don't think this makes the cut in modern like at all. Like Field of the Dead is... this is Field of the Dead, right? It's a take on Field of the Dead, and Field of the Dead is like a bajillion times, babillion times better than this card. Like it costs nothing to play that card. Right? Like this, on the other hand, is much more killable than a land and costs, I was going to say 4 times as much, but that's bad math. It costs infinite times more to cast technically. But, 4 is an awful lot, especially in a format like Modern for a thing like this. But in Commander, when this is sitting in your command zone in a landfall deck or dredge deck or like something like that, then like maybe you got a chance. Now I will say, I shouldn't have left Modern too quickly here, because in Modern, like, channel lands are a thing, and like other lands that you care about having, bringing back and forth from your graveyard to your hand, and kind of like a Life from the Loam strategy. Like maybe you could get something cooking with this, but even with channel lands and Life from the Loam decks and blah, 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 I'm just really not sure that this is on the level it needs to be competitively. But again, Commander players, I've already seen you be really excited about this today, and I can see why. This is a really, really interesting Commander. You guys know that I'm a fan of the Abzan. And I came in riding Rhinos repping that Abzan. I love Landfall. I like Dredge. I like the ability to like combine Dredge and Landfall on the same card. Really, really cool Commander in terms of overall design, but again, we'll see if it goes anywhere competitively. Probably not, but it doesn't have to. It's cool Commander. There, that wasn't so bad. Now, before we get into the rares and mythics from today that I think might actually have some effects here and there on the Modern metagame, big or small, I'm not really sure. Let's look first at, just like yesterday, some of the cards that were printed into Modern via Modern Horizons 3 previews that have never been available to play in Modern before and are a little bit exciting. So first, let's look at Victimize Commander All-Star. This is like 3 of my Commander decks. You know how many Commander decks I have? 3. It's just, I love Sacrifice decks, and this has always been amazing in Sacrifice decks. So not only do we get to see, a decent Sacrifice deck card a second ago that's mostly Commander playable, but later on in the video, we'll see a card that might actually really push those decks competitively, and a card like this is awesome in those decks too. So excited to see Victimize. I've already seen a couple of Modern brewers say that they're really excited to kind of cook around this card, and I can see why. It's a fun card to play in Commander. It was a fun card to play when it came out in like Urza's Saga? Like for like freaking forever ago. This is a great Magic card that I've been playing for like almost 30 years at this point. So excited to have it in Modern. We'll see what we can do with it because it seems like there's got to be something. We also got Cephalid Coliseum, which is like really exciting. A lot of people have played a lot of this card, but in like Legacy, this was a fairly like playable card for a while. I don't think it is anymore. Like, it's draw 3, discard 3 can be exploited in so many ways because draw 3 is a lot of cards. Discard 3 is a lot of cards. Just throw them all in your yard and do something with them from there. Just phenomenal Magic card that I think will probably have some effect on Modern. I think that basically all of the cards that I'm pointing out that got reprinted into Modern will probably have some effect on Modern. Again, big or small, I'm not sure. There's stuff like Deep Analysis and like juvenile jokes about shortening the card's name aside. The card was playable in a bunch of... Again, I believe Legacy Dredge played this for a while. I know Modern... Or not Modern, sorry. I think it was like Extended something or other played 4 copies of this. Now I can't remember. It's been so long and nobody actually ever played Extended. There will be people in the comments section. They're lying. But still, Deep Analysis has been an important card in multiple decks throughout Magic history. And if you're looking at the casting cost of the card, you're doing it wrong. You just want to like put this in your graveyard any number of ways and then cast it for 2 mana and draw a bunch. So Deep Analysis is a powerful Magic card that I'm not quite sure breaks into decks like, again, Dredge and other like graveyard decks in Modern, but it's at least going to be tried out. I'm not sure if it's going to earn the jersey or not, but it's going to be at tryouts. But now let's get into the rares and mythics and stuff from today that I think might actually have some real impact on the format. That said, I will start with sort of my lowest ranked one. And this one might be more of a commander card at the end of the day, but I think anytime you see a land like this, you definitely have to pay attention to it. So let's take a quick look at Spymaster's Vault. This is a land that enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a swamp, and it taps for a black mana. You can pay a black and tap it and have target creature you control connive X, where X is the number of creatures that died this turn. So really, really interesting utility on this thing right here, man. I know it's not the absolute best sweeper protection in the entire world because, gotta have a creature left behind after the sweeper, but if it's just been a particularly brutal combat step or something like that, and it's not even creatures that died under your control, it's just creatures that died, so they can die under any opponent's control at this point. And still, you can connive like 3 in like a kind of bad combat step. But obviously the outliers, on this are going to be like connive 5, connive 6, and that's pretty tempting. But even if you just connive 1 for a single black mana, I think that's a good deal a lot of the time, especially considering it is super easy to make this thing more or less inconsequential to add to your deck. Oh, you're playing black, you're playing swamps. Cool. Oh, you got Urborg in your deck? All right, so it's just completely inconsequential, but still, like a black deck is probably going to play a swamp or 2. So swamp turn 1, this turn 2. And again, there was very little or basically 0 opportunity cost to putting this thing in your deck whatsoever. So again, just for that reason and that reason alone, I think the card is probably Modern playable because why not? Not to mention connive is a great ability that can really function a lot of different ways for a lot of different decks. It makes your creatures larger, but it also puts cards in your yard. It draws cards, which is the best thing you can do in a game of Magic. So yeah, this may be my lowest ranked playable of the day, but it might be like way better than I'm estimating it here. I give this thing a pretty high ceiling. But up next, let's take a look at Flage, not Phage. Flage, Floggy? Pelagi, I'm not sure. It's Titan of Fire's Fury. It's one of these. It's an Uro, a Kroxa, these guys. 3 mana, 1 and a Boros, red and a white for a 6/6 legendary Elder Giant. When it ETBs, sack it unless it escaped. Whenever Phage enters the battlefield or attacks, I said Phage. Whenever Flage enters the battlefield or attacks, it deals 3 damage to any target. You gain 3 life. You cast Lightning Helix when this ETBs. It also escapes for double red and double white and exile 5 other cards from your yard. Well, I think this is probably worse than Kroxa, and Kroxa's just fine. Kroxa's sometimes, but who knows? But I don't know how good this actually is. I do think casting Lightning Helix is super duper tempting. It makes you want to be like, I get to play 8 Lightning Helixes. And you do. You get to play 8 Lightning Helixes and 4 Boros Charm and just build Boros Burn and go to town. And then eventually you can, after casting Lightning Helix for 3 mana on turn 3, you can eventually escape this and get to cast Lightning Helix again on your 6/6. It's again, maybe now I'm kind of talking myself into it, I was doing the bit where I was gonna, build up to saying that's all Magic Christmas Land, but like maybe it's not. Maybe this is like actually pretty decent. Just again, having copies 5 through 8 of Lightning Helix might be good enough. But there's a reason I'm talking about this card second in this category. I don't think it's the best card that we're gonna look at today, but I do think there's a couple of very unique things about it. It's good to see another one of these Titans, continuing this sort of cycle. That's cool. But we also got to see Wrath of the Skies today. We're turning up the heat slightly with this one. This is double white and X for a sorcery. You get X energy counters, then you may pay any amount of energy. Destroy each artifact, creature, and enchantment with mana value less than or equal to the amount of energy paid this way. Now, this card actually allows me to look at 2 cards that I wanted to look at earlier, but I actually kind of held off to this point because they're lower rarity, but I still think they might be very, very good, especially when you have this card to like set up into them. We got to see both Unstable Amulet today, as well as Tune the Narrative. Now, Tune the Narrative is just a single blue mana for an instant, draw a card, create 2 energy tokens, or 2 energy counters. So just looking at that on turn 1, like end of your opponent's turn 1, into this on turn 2, you're basically just wiping the board. For just like 2 mana, you could pretty easily wipe the board, but especially going in to turn 2, to turn like 3, turn 4, you could pump another couple of extra mana into this and really actually just wipe all the like 3s and 4s off the board. It's also worth noting too that just by itself for 2 mana, this wipes all the tokens and stuff. So that's kind of neat, just like it blows up a bunch of different permanent types too. Just a very strong card, especially in combination with like cheap cards that will also get you some energy and will fit into the same kind of like control idea that a card like this fits into. Like Unstable Amulet over here is a really interesting Magic card. This is 2 mana, it's 1 and a red for an artifact, and in ETBs you get 2 energy counters. Whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, Amulet deals a damage to each opponent. You can also tap it and pay 2 energy to exile the top card of your library. You can play it until you exile another card with Unstable Amulet. So interesting wording there. It's not like until the end of the next turn or anything. It's just until you exile another card with Amulet. So you can go ahead and tap this to turn it comes down, and the card's going to be safe as long as Amulet's out. I really like that about it. But this too provides you with a couple of energy if you want it. For Wrath of the Skies, but it too is just a good card kind of in a vacuum. I really like this middle ability, again, the middle of the sandwich here that deals the damage whenever you cast a card from anywhere other than your hand. There might be some sort of combo potential, even like an infinite damage kind of combo potential with that if you can find the right loops. But again, if you're playing the right kind of deck, period, it's probably going to deal a good amount of damage throughout the game. So if you can get this to be a reliable card draw piece, as well as a lava axe or a lightning bolt, then it's a lot of value for just a couple of mana. So even if it just draws you a card when it enters the battlefield effectively, and that's all it does for a few turns, that's okay. It's also an artifact. I just like an awful lot about this, and I think the potential for value is high on it. But again, when you put together all the cards we're seeing that create energy, there's a kind of control-y strategy forming that I'm kind of a little bit of a fan of. And back to Wrath of the Skies, I think it's one of the better energy, not really producing, but cards that care about energy that we've seen so far this set, if not the best. This is a good sweeper. Next is Emperor of Bones. I want this dude in standard so bad. He's 2 mana, 1 and a black for a 2/2 Skeleton Noble. At the beginning of combat on your turn, exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard. You can pay 1 and a black to adapt 2. That's if he doesn't have any +1/+1 counters on him, he gets 2 +1/+1 counters. Whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on Emperor of Bones, put a creature card exiled with Emperor onto the battlefield under your control with a finality counter on it. It gains haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So really cool because technically starting on turn 2 if you can engineer it correctly, but most likely on turn 3, you're going to adapt this and get a creature out of your yard. And you have it for a turn. It's kind of a shallow grave, I guess, effect. There's a couple of effects like this in Magic history, but this is most likely, I guess, most like a shallow grave on legs. And that's just so cool, man. I like the creature type. Again, it's not playable in standard, but I really, really wish that a card like this was. It would be a little bit pushed, though, if it were. But in Modern, I think it fits right in, I don't think that it's too pushed, but it just like Flage, I was talking about this, one of those cards that kind of wants to be built around, but it doesn't necessarily slot into any existing big deck in Modern. So really, really cool to kind of brew with a card like this. And I'm not sure that it's as good as I want it to be. It usually has to wait a turn, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it can just kind of be a zombify for a total of 4 mana the turn you play it. You get to do it. The ability triggers combat on your turn, so it can do something the turn it comes into play. Just a lot of cool stuff about this, man. Not the absolute best reanimation piece that Modern has access to, but one of the coolest, and honestly, it's really not too bad either. Now, this next card we're going to look at is the last card in this section, so I think it's the best, rare that we got to see today, potentially, but it's not the last card we'll look at today. There is a card I'm more excited about, but for now, let's take a look at Swan Song. Strict Serenade. It's another reference, but this time the reference is more than playable. It's a single blue mana for an instant. Counter target artifact, creature, or planeswalker spell. Its controller creates a 2/2 blue bird creature token with flying. This card is ridiculous. A single blue mana for this. It's every bit as good as Swan Song was, just for different reasons. And Swan Song was a really, really good Magic card if you don't remember, But, Strict Serenade looks, it's basically an essence scatter. And I know that early in the game, you're giving them a 2/2 bird with flying. So whatever you essence scattered better be better than that, but in Modern, it almost certainly is going to be. So there's that, but also it's an annul, it takes out artifacts. I kind of like that. And planeswalkers too, in the mid and late game. So whatever, that's fine too. Just a lot of cool things to like about this card. A single mana essence scatter or annul or whatever is always going to be fun. And you don't really mind. I know some people are probably looking at this but it gives them a bird. You do not care. You do not care. Absolutely not. You take away the best creature that they built their deck around, and instead they get a bird. And they didn't build their deck around a 2/2 bird with flying and no other abilities. They built their deck around the guy you countered. So this is a very good, unbelievably good Magic card. A single mana for this effect is great. We've already learned that in the past. I don't know why we'd have to learn it again. But I saved my favorite for last. I was about to say the best, but it's not really objective. Very subjective, but it is my video. This is the card that I am most excited for in probably the last few years of playing Magic. And by the way, if you hear a bass line in the background, I did not add some sort of BGM for this part of the video or anything. My neighbors just really like loud music, and that's cool. They can like what they like. But either way, let's look at Marionette Apprentice, everybody. 1 and a black for a 1/2 human artificer with Fabricate 1. That means when it comes into play, it either gets a +1/+1 counter, or you can make a 1/1 servo artifact creature token. And this is Zulaport Cutthroat that also cares about artifacts leaving the battlefield. A Zulaport Cutthroat Marionette Master mashup. That's ridiculous. Whenever an artifact or creature leaves the battlefield under your control, you deal them a damage. They lose a life. They lose a life. Everyone loses. Each opponent loses a life. What a fantastic. Just a beautiful. Can we applaud? Can we give this card an applause? You knew I was going to be excited about this, right? Immediately, day one goes into all of my commander decks, goes into the mono black cube, goes into the regular cube. Why not? It just goes in basically every thing that I do. Anytime I'm playing Magic, you're probably going to see this card on the table at some point. I cannot wait to get my hands on one of these. I hope that it's 10 cents, but even if it's $5, I basically have to own at least one of these and then just pass it around my commander decks or whatever. Just a very, very strong sort of Blood Artist effect. I guess Blood Artist cared about when any creature died, so maybe Zulaport Cutthroat is the closer one, but I think that also gains you life. This one, they have made sure that it's not better than any of the 2-mana cards like it. But, it's on an even playing field, and honestly, caring about artifacts going to the graveyard is so much better than only caring about creatures, because artifact tokens are a thing. Treasures, whenever treasures go to the graveyard, and yes, for the millionth time, tokens touch the graveyard. So this basically says sack a treasure, everyone takes a damage or loses a life. And that, again, Prosper, I gotta build Prosper. I've gotta Prosper, I gotta build that deck again. But God, yeah, you see me getting overwhelmed and flustered with all the things I want to do with this card yesterday, but the set's not going to be out for another little while. Is this the only card I'm ever going to pre-order? I don't know, it depends on the price. I don't know, guys. I want to sit here and talk about this card for an hour and all the disgusting things that we're going to do together, because we're going to be this, son. We're going to be best friends by the end of this. Clue tokens, food tokens, blood tokens, just all the tokens, man. And even if you just have a bunch of artifact creatures and they all go to the graveyard, that counts. It doesn't count double. That would be amazing, but still, that's pretty awesome. Just artifacts going to the yard, that happens all the time, bro. So, God, man. card's going to stack up a ton of damage very, very fast. Oh my goodness. I got to stop. I could just like babble on and say nothing really about this card for the next 5 minutes, but I think you get my point here. This is the best card that's ever been printed. At least again, in my extremely subjective opinion, this is probably one of the, like 5 years from now, this will probably be one of my top 3 favorite cards ever printed. Like I'm calling it. And that's it for this one. I keep trying to reload MTG previews and Mythic Spoiler, but they will not reload. I don't know. My internet's fine. I reloaded other sites just fine. I think maybe it's a traffic thing right now, but I have no idea if there are new cards since I started recording this video. Either way, we'll get to them tomorrow on twitch.tv/SBMTGDev. We're going to be going live probably around like 9:30 p.m. EST to Eastern Standard Time to kind of go over whatever previews happen tomorrow, maybe talk some other Magic, maybe get a game in, I'm not sure. We might talk about Hades too, might talk about like King of the Ring predictions. There's a lot of stuff we could talk about on Thursday. We'll get down to it. We'll have a nice little time. Come chill with the fam and be part of the squad. You know, it's a chill. The stream is always a lot of fun to be a part of. So, and it helps me honestly more than it helps you guys. I promise you. But yeah, we'll try to get on stream timely tomorrow. I know you guys don't care, but my basement flooded. I woke up this morning, didn't have hot water, so I was like, oh, let's go turn the pilot light on. Basement's flooded, like 1.5 inches, 2 inches of water in my basement. So I spent most of the day bailing it out today. I gotta try and dry it with a shop vac tomorrow and then dry it out, and hopefully by Friday I can take a shower again. That'd be nice, but I got a lot going on, so we're gonna try to get everything done in a timely manner this week. But just so you know what's going on, if I don't and videos come out at 2 o'clock in the morning like this one probably did, that's probably why. So anyway, that's all I got for this one. Just do the YouTube stuff on your way out. Before you hit the lights, hit the like button. It's shaped like a thumb going up. I don't know what that's called. It's a thumb that's pointing this direction. It's called something. But yeah, you hit that. You can also hit subscribe, the bell for the notifications. I guess YouTubers say to do that. You probably should if you really want to know when I put out videos. What's the point of subscribing otherwise? You can check out the Patreon, $1 a month to pick what content we do. That's going to be especially important once Bloomborough comes out. So get in there, I guess. You know, link in the description to all this stuff, as well as Mythic Spoiler and videos we've done. Day 1 of previews in the description. Check all that out. But the end of the video has finally... Welcome back to the end of the video. That's a reference to another YouTube channel that I don't know if anyone's going to get. If you know what that reference, welcome back to the end of the video, put it in the comment section. But anyway, that's all I got for this one, guys. I love you very much. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.